Hey history students, Mr. Birch here. Today we're going to be talking about George Mason and the Constitutional Convention of 1787. As always, when you see the question, press pause, take a moment to read and answer, and then press play and we'll go over it together. During the Constitutional Convention of 1787, George Mason argued F. Against increased power for the national government. G. For the dissolution of state governments. H. Against the passage of the Bill of Rights. J. For the creation of a strong executive branch. Well, as always, we have to figure out what the question's asking. Well, this one, I kind of underlined everything and then circled something. So the question's very direct. It doesn't leave a lot of room to eliminate things. This question's just saying, during the convention of 1787, George Mason argued against. So we need to know who George Mason is or was, and what did he argue against? So first of all, what can we eliminate here? Well, the dissolution of state governments, that means the elimination of state governments. There really wasn't a lot of people arguing for that at this time. And so I think that one seems quite clear that that didn't really happen. And then the second one, against the passage of a Bill of Rights. Well, if we know anything about George Mason, we know that he was pro-Bill of Rights, much more so than probably anyone at the Constitutional Convention. So that answer is actually exact opposite of what he argued for. Well, what do we have to know? Well, let's first read this here. Constitutional Convention of 1787 occurred 11 years after the Declaration of Independence and 6 years after the official ratification of the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation, if you remember, was the original founding document establishing what kind of government we would have, which was a very strong state government, a very weak federal government, and it didn't work very well. So that's why we have the Constitutional Convention of 1787 to recreate a standard for how our U.S. government was going to operate. And again, the U.S. Constitution, well, this is the backbone of U.S. government and law, still essential today. George Mason argued against the Constitution not because he hated the entire Constitution, but because it contained no declaration of rights. It had no rights to the people, and so basically it was giving too much power to the national government, not enough to the individual people, the individuals in the government. His arguments eventually led to the Bill of Rights. Okay, who was George Mason? And well, let's just kind of talk about it real briefly. George Mason was a wealthy Virginia planter and politician. He's often considered a forgotten father in contrast to the founding fathers because his signature, as I put right here on the screen, is strangely not found on the U.S. Constitution. He was at the convention. He was one of the delegates. He was from Virginia. He was there arguing and debating for 4 months with the other delegates in creation of this Constitution, but then his signature's not on it. And well, why is that? Well, that's because he was arguing to say that we needed a Bill of Rights that essentially gave rights declared in the Constitution to the people of the country. And that did not pass in the original Constitution that was ratified in 1787. So he didn't sign it. He left angry. He went back and argued within the state of Virginia to get this Bill of Rights. And eventually in 1789, another Virginian, James Madison, brought to the next congressional meeting in 1789, he brought the idea of the Bill of Rights. It was finally ratified in 1791, just 1 year before George Mason's death. So the thing we need to remember about George Mason is that he was very much against this strong national or federal government that did not give very explicit rights to the people. He actually wrote the Bill of Rights, essentially. It was called the Declaration of Rights for the state of Virginia, even before the Declaration of Independence in 1776.